All right. We're reading chapter 15, Mara, daughter of the Nile. If you like this video, you can like or comment or subscribe. That's going to help a lot of other people find it and be able to listen to this really good book as well. Chapter 15, The Signal. But waiting was hardest. A day dragged by, then another, without word from the priest. Sheftu had spoken to Ashur early. The diggers were arranged for and waiting, though they knew not what their task was to be. Nakonk was waiting, the beetle provisioned and ready to spirit the men away. The king was waiting for word, Mara waiting to carry it, Sheftu waiting in a torment of suspense to act. For the first time in 6 years, the wheels of his secret life had ground to a dead halt. All plans hinged on one now, and that one hung like an unanswered question in the air, growing hourly more urgent. It was all Sheftu could do to grace the court of Hatshepsut with unchanged serenity, to behave as usual under the eyes of his household. Hardest of all was to hide from Mara the strain he was feeling, to parry her questions and then laugh at her anger. Each night she came to the inn for news, and he could tell her nothing. Their conversations were like duels. Rather than dreading the task which still hung over him, he now began to long for it, that the issue might be settled. Inactivity ached like a tooth. Soon after noon on the fourth day, restlessness led him down to the barracks of the Queen's bodyguard, whose quarters and parade field occupied a large open area to the rear of the palace grounds. He found Khofra sitting on a hard chair in his severe and cell-like quarters, waiting for the bugle which would summon him to his afternoon inspection of the troops. "Come in, my lord, come in," the old man greeted him, waving to a second and even harder chair. "Sit down and test the rigors of military life. Though I promise this is luxury compared to what those poor devils on the parade grounds yonder call their own. Well, there's no other way to make soldiers of them. Hard chairs, hard beds, hard fighting." "And a general as hard as they are," suggested Sheftu, sitting down. Khofra gave his soundless laugh. They look up to me, knowing I've slept on rocky ground oftener than they've slept in their couches. They're coming on, Lord Sheftu. They're shaping up. Someday we'll have an army here instead of a crowd of idlers. But I warn you," the old general lowered his voice and his face grew grim, "I've promised them action, campaigns, foreign battlefields, victories like those we knew in the old days, for the glory of Egypt. Take care you produce them." "Never fear. There'll be action in plenty once Thutmose takes command. By the feather, our empire's in a sorry mess," hot Khofra. Sheftu got up and began to pace. "Every week a new dispatch comes in. There's another uprising in Nubia, a bad one, and an outbreak on the border farther north. Worse yet, the king of Kadesh has stirred up every city king in northern Palestine and Syria. They're banding together to defy us, and the queen does nothing. Nothing. Our governors are going frantic. They need more men, more gold." "They need it. So do I, by Ammon, yet she's even taking what I have." Sheftu stopped. "She's doing what?" "Reducing my forces, cutting down allotments, refusing to fill my orders for supplies. You didn't know this?" "By the Devourer, no." He listened with growing fury as Khofra explained. The bodyguard, normally 2,000 troops, had been reduced by a third even before Khofra had assumed command. In the past 2 weeks, 100 more had been dismissed, and the pay for those remaining was already 5 days late. "Then about the helmets," Khofra growled. "A week ago, I sent in a requisition for 200 archer helmets of scarlet leather, well padded and quilted with a good gold fringe. I needed 300, but some of the old ones will serve, though they be shabby enough. This morning the requisition came back, refused. Perhaps she means to send the archers into battle bareheaded. Something must be done. Something will be done, snapped Sheftu. Now at once. What of the regular army? Those not of the bodyguard, how badly have they dwindled? By more than half. And as for chariots and horses? Khofra threw up his hands. That will be the task of our prince, said Sheftu. He'll build the regulars up soon enough, once we've set him on his throne. But to set him there we need the bodyguard, full strength and well equipped. And by Ammon, we'll have it. Who rules on these requisitions? My lord Nahara, master of armories and of the white storehouse for linen. He of the face like a chip of granite. He doles out the pay too, when there is any. Nahara, said Sheftu thoughtfully, brother of the architect himself, a man to be reckoned with. Sheftu knew him only too well. It was not the first time that stony face had stood between him and his goal. He dropped into a chair. He's Senmut's right hand, hot Khafra, and Senmut's the queen. He's Senmut's right hand, and Senmut's is the queen's. Obviously, she needs the gold elsewhere for some new extravagance. Was not her last one folly enough? Snorted Khofra. I mean the 2 obelisks. God of Egypt, how does the woman conceive these things? Single blocks, unmarred by joint or even chisel marks? That was merely the beginning, remarked Sheftu dryly. He mimicked, the obelisks are mere dull stone, and so unworthy of the daughter of Sun, I desire that they reflect. By my Ka, he burst out suddenly, there's her need for gold. Did you know, hot Khofra, that she is casing the shafts in electrum? Khofra's shaggy eyebrows soared. Those man-made mountains? Impossible! Our queen is fond of the impossible. Gold and silver over every inch of those monster slabs. I saw them at work on it myself, only a few days ago. By this time, I'll wager they're working up near the roof, and Egypt's treasury's nigh empty. Small wonder she needs funds. Sheftu is on his feet, stalking about the bare little room. She'll not steal them from the bodyguard. Look you, my general, it's clear how this came about. The queen fretting for more gold, the architect as usual scheming out a solution. Most glorious majesty, why feed and clothe 2,000 idle soldiers in a time of peace? Riffraff, eating their bellies full at your radiance's expense, and it is my brother Nahara who holds the purse strings. Aye, he'll wish he'd held his peace. Sheftu paused behind his chair, fingers drumming upon its back. A smile was beginning to curve the corners of his mouth. But what can you do? Put in Khofra. I can see the queen. I can inform her with the gravest concern of the bodyguard's condition. I can thank Ammon repeatedly and loudly that I discovered the situation before it was too late. You mean she doesn't know of it? Of course she knows. But my general, if I behave like one saving her from disaster, she will not admit she knows. She will first try to find out what is so wrong with Senmut's little scheme. And what will you tell her? Sheftu smiled. Hot Khofra. Her radiance, the daughter of the sun, fears only one thing, the loss of her throne. Suppose it were suggested to her that Senmut's motives might not be pure, that he might have reasons to wish her bodyguard depleted, her protection undermined. She would never believe it, not of her precious architect. No. Do you remember Ness, who commanded her great expedition to Punt a few years back? Do you remember Thuti, once Lord High Treasurer? And Nebarai, only recently Grand Overseer of her temple? Whatever happened to those great favorites of hers? Hot Khofra. Strange how they have dropped out of sight forever. Khofra shot a sidelong glance at him. I know nothing of such matters, my lord, but I do know these men commanded projects close to her heart. She has never taken a moment's interest in her bodyguard. She is about to begin, retorted Sheftu. I'll wager you a gold chain, my general, that an hour from now the palace bodyguard will have become the consuming interest of Hatshepsut's life. and Senmut an unhappy man. Kofra's skeptical eyes met Sheftu's across the room, and gradually the doubt cleared away from them. He chuckled, and as the shrill blast of the bugle pierced the silence, he rose, buckled on his quilted cuirass, and exchanged his square-cut wig for a leather helmet. "I wish you luck with it, my friend," he said. "I'm no magician, as you seem to be, but get me men and I'll give you soldiers. That I can promise." With a nod of farewell, he stepped out the door, which opened onto the parade ground, and joined the two aides who waited him there. For a moment, Sheftu stood watching the ranks of copper-skinned foot soldiers file by the old general in the brilliant sunlight. They were few indeed. As the chariots bearing the archers followed, he could spot horses gone lame, damaged wheels, bareheaded men. Smiling grimly, he strode out of the building, across the barracks yard, and into the palace gardens by the nearest gate. When he emerged an hour later, it was with the jaunty step of a man whose time has not been wasted. He signaled a groom to fetch his chariot and stood savoring the fresh breeze and the thought of the interview just past, feeling more invigorated than he had for weeks. It was even possible he might enjoy Lord Merib's party on the morrow. A bald-pated little man in the garb of a priest appeared suddenly from nowhere, cast an idle look about him, then stopping a pace or two from Sheftu, stooped to adjust his sandal. Sheftu's heart gave a leap, and the party fled from his mind. He turned his back to the little man, but edged closer. He was rewarded by a whisper. "Tomorrow, the hour of the 5th mark." Baldpate vanished, leaving Sheftu staring casually into the middle distance with everything in him in an uproar. When his chariot arrived, he failed to notice it. Turning on his heel, he hurried into the labyrinth of palace gardens in search of Mara. "There," murmured Anani, "that lamb is finished now. Only one more and the shawl will be done. What think you of it, Mara?" At the other end of the garden bench, Mara interrupted her fascinating study of the ring on her finger to inspect the square of embroidery Anani held up. She smiled. Anani had worked a careful picture in colored threads, a green hillside dotted with lambs and a sleeping shepherd, with the square tower of a Syrian temple showing beyond. "It is beautiful, my princess." "But not so beautiful as the hill in my memory." Anani sighed and plucked another skein of white wool from the work-basket. After a moment, Mara rose and strolled down to the pool in the center of the tiny garden, dropped down on the soft grass beside its rim, and once more fell to studying the ring. It was the heavy electrum band with the jeweled lotuses, the ring Sheftu had given her on the ship. She knew well it was dangerous folly to wear it, since it was supposed to have left her possession long ago, as a bribe for that friend in Abydos. One glimpse of it, and Sheftu would merely wait his moment to cut her throat. But how the eyes of those high and mighty palace servants had popped when they noticed it this morning. Mara grinned at the memory. It was worth a little danger to lord it over them occasionally, especially the supercilious butler who looked down his nose at her whenever he caught her slipping off her sandals. He would think twice next time about whom he snubbed. She turned the ring thoughtfully on her finger, wishing she had given in earlier to the temptation to put that butler in his place. For already she was convinced that the ring bore some potent charm. All morning good luck had followed her, smoothed her way, and made easy the most difficult situations. Think of this morning's audience with the king, if that was not luck. "Mara," said Anani suddenly, "someone is coming. It is the young nobleman of the lotus garden. Ah, would he not be handsome with a beard?" Mara had swung around, spied Sheftu striding up the red graveled path, snatched the ring from her finger, and stuffed it into her sash before Anani had finished speaking. Now she rose, brushed off her skirt with trembling hands, and sauntered forward as nonchalantly as she could. "A beard?" she murmured. I had never thought of it, Highness. It was all right. He couldn't have noticed that quick motion, and the folds of her sash concealed the hard little lump beneath it. She faced Sheftu composedly as he stopped before them, smiling. Princess, rejoice. His long hand moved from his lips to his forehead in a gesture of careless grace. I bear Pharaoh's greetings. Her radiance inquires after the welfare of the Princess of Canaan. For the first time in 4 days, his eyes had come alive. Something had happened. Mara translated hastily. Tell him I am content, Anani murmured. She is content. What is it, Sheftu? Tell me, for the love of Ammon. The signal has come. I have instructions for you. Say something to the princess. Highness, His Excellency wishes to know if... Mara, Anani was facing her, an odd, nervous determination in her manner. I do not want to talk to this young man, nor does he want to talk to me. Please, will you not relieve me of the burden? I have an errand elsewhere. But Highness, please, Mara. Anani put a hand on Mara's arm and looked her full in the eyes. The summer house yonder is empty, and no one comes here. You will be quite alone. She snatched her work basket from the bench and hurried across the garden and through the gate, leaving Mara staring after her. What is this? Demanded Sheftu in a low voice. I don't know. Quite often lately she makes some excuse to slip away from me. I think she goes to see a Syrian woman in the court of weavers, but it is strange that she would do that now. Mara whirled back to him, suddenly excited. No matter, should we question when Ammon smiles on us? We're free to talk. If you want to risk it, she spoke truth. No one comes here. Sheftu flashed a quick glance around the garden and then took Mara's arm and hurried her toward a little summer house which stood at the far end of the pool in a clump of acacia trees. It was a light wooden structure, little more than a stone platform and a roof, but vines clambered thick over its 3 lattice walls, and its open front faced a little away from the gate, so that once inside it, they could see without being seen. Mara sat down on a cushioned stool, looking about her with delight. All was cool green here, speckled with moving sunlight, little flakes and pellets of gold which sifted through the vines to dance agitatedly over Sheftu's white robes and her own, and the painted floor, whenever the breeze stirred the leaves. Ammon smiles indeed, murmured Sheftu, placing another stool where he could watch the gate. Something is bringing us good fortune. Mara, aware of the hard little lump of the ring pressing against her waist, was quite sure she knew what that something was, but she said only, It's been a good day for me. It's been a day of good fortune for me. What else has happened? I've been longing to tell you. Bless Anani for giving me the chance. We saw the king this morning at last. As you know, I've been trying for 3 days. Did he not say you could arrange for an audience whenever? But it isn't as easy as it sounds. One has to find the proper chamberlain, tell him one lie, and Anani another. Sheftu cut her off impatiently, glancing toward the gate. No matter. Say on, maid, the rest of it. The rest was no easy task either. I had to give him your message somehow with a room full of people. I know he sent them all away last time, but I suppose he didn't dare do that twice for fear of making them suspicious. They're all spies, Sheftu. How do you know that? From the way he glares at them, Mara suggested. Mara shrugged, skipped nimbly over why the room had not been cleared, a feat which she had herself accomplished with no small difficulty, and hurried on. Be that as it may, they were all there, and I had to think fast. I promise you, it was Anani who saved me. She and the sketches. Sketches? Mara grinned, pausing a moment to enjoy his bewilderment. She was relishing the whole situation, the secluded little arbor, the danger, their lowered voices, and most of all her secret amusement at how difficult this tale would sound when she told it to her master. The sketches. They were all over the table. When we came in the room, sheets and scraps of papyrus and a clutter of pens and inks and they were all drawings of vases. Sheftu's face cleared. Asked, the vases. They are a pastime of the king's. His hand is skilled with the artist's pen. So Anani was saying when he walked into the room, if His Highness has drawn these, Mara, then he is an artist of great talent. They are the most beautiful thing I have seen in Egypt. And behold, there he stood, hearing every word. I know not which was the more surprised. Anani's cheeks rivaled the hue of her shawls. Sheftu was grinning. And was he flattered? By my Ka, I believe he was. At least it caused him to think of her as a human being instead of a Syrian cow. For a moment, I thought he was going to forget and speak to her in Babylonian. And then, alas, for Mara. But he stopped in time and bade me ask her which sketch she liked best. Did he indeed? Ay, and she picked one, though she was frightened out of her senses and all of her embroideries trembling. Mara pantomimed Anani's gesture, extending a timidly pointing finger and then jerking it away as if someone had bitten. And then, chuckled Sheftu, he laughed, as you might guess, and folded his arms after his manner. Mara sat very erect, folded her own arms, and momentarily became the king. Over ornate, he said, and a little vulgar. Well, being Syrian, she cannot help her taste. Tell her I will have it made in yellow alabaster and delivered to her with my compliments. By Ammon, it is well no one but myself sees you mimic him thus, exclaimed Sheftu a little grimly. You might forfeit that impudent tongue of yours. Nay, I mean no impudence. I but tell you how it happened. Indeed, I'd not mock him, Sheftu. I was not but pleased by what he had done for my poor princess. Her face shone as if someone had lit a torch inside her. It has made her heart light all day, I think. You seem fond of this barbarian, observed Sheftu, leaning backward to peer cautiously toward the gate. It may be I am. I pity her. She is lonely and homesick and so far from home. Sheftu turned, a mixture of amusement and impatience on his face. Do we seek our necks here to talk about the Canaanite? I would hear more of this lucky morning of yours. You shall, but I crave a promise of you, Sheftu. When all this is finished and the king wears his crown, will you send Anani again to Canaan? Say you will. Her fate can mean naught to you, whether in Egypt or Syria. She shall sail to the end of the world if you like, but proceed with your story. What have the sketches to do with you? I passed your message by means of them. His promise gained, Mara was willing and eager to go on. That was a fine bit of sleight of hand, though I praise my own wits. Remember the message? He of the fan and he of the feather have come into our house? Of course I know not what it signifies, added Mara innocently, though she had figured out long since that it meant the queen's fan-bearer and some other great noble, possibly a judge, whose symbol was the feather of truth, had been persuaded to swear allegiance to the king. But I wagered His Highness would know well enough. I juggled the conversation with a skill that would have shamed Sahur. Until we spoke again of the sketches, then I stepped forward, so impulsively, and snatched a pen, and drew a little design as a suggestion for some future vase, and lo, it was a fan and a feather beside a house bearing the king's cartouche. Very good indeed, said Sheftu, who had been grinning as he listened. A fine tale, and told by one who does not believe in ruining things with false modesty. I congratulate you, little one, on your cleverness, your sagacity, your... Oh, hold your tongue. Could you have done better? He laughed softly, shaking his head. Nay, perhaps not as well. I doubt if... Suddenly his face went stiff with attention as the sound of voices drifted to them from somewhere just beyond the garden wall. He twisted for a quick glance toward the gate, then sprang up silently and pulled Mara with him to the dimmest corner of the summer house. As they stood there flattened against the lattice wall, the voices grew more distinct and footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Looked like a man who'd just seen a kept face to face, one voice was saying. I do not jest, my friend. Something's happened between her radiance and the architect. He didn't speak to you? Nay, he was in too much haste. He burst out of her chambers. as if the devourer were after him, and went by me without a glance. I heard him snarling for his chariot outside, but I didn't stay to wave farewell. The climate's not healthy when he's in a rage. I hope he strangles on, muttered the other. Last flood season he took 5 of my vineyards for crown property by royal permission. But I note his slaves are cultivating them now. He'll want the throne next, hark my words, 10 years from now. The voices faded as the two went out the other gate. Mara drew a long breath and glanced up at Sheftu, who seemed to have derived a great deal of malicious pleasure from what he had heard. Who was it? She whispered. 2 nobles who love Count Setmuz as much as I, returned Sheftu dryly. Count Ka-Keeper, the one who talked about the vineyards. I believe I had best arrange a little conference with him sometime soon. Now look you, blue-eyed one, we must be out of here. I'll not be at the inn tonight, so you need not come. But tomorrow night? It is tomorrow that... Mara did not finish, but searched his face anxiously. He whispered. Tomorrow at the mark of 5, the messenger told me. We should be finished in 2 hours if all goes well. If all goes well? She repeated bitterly. He ignored that. So get thee to the tavern by the mark of 7, or as soon after as you are able. Is your Rashed still well bedazzled? So I hope. He's tugging at his leash. You'll have no trouble. One so clever as you, so remarkable, so sagacious. Oh, leave off. Her scowl faded as he stood there laughing down at her, the sun flecks dancing crazily over his face and headcloth, and glinting into one jewel in his golden collar until it flashed like a star. I'll be there, by his leave or without it, she murmured. May the gods grant you will. Sheftu, take care. Little one, I'll do my best. He guided her gently back to her stool. Sit here now and let the goldfish admire you a while. Give me about the count of 100. Farewell. He slipped around the edge of the vine-clad wall and was gone. Mara could hear his footsteps on the gravel path, calm and unhurried. She did not look up, fixing her attention instead on the fat, red goldfish drifting lazily in and out between the lotus stems in the depths of the pool. It would never do to think of where he was going, what he must do before she saw him again, if she ever did. By the time she had counted the goldfish 3 times over, the garden had been empty for some time. She rose, went out into the glare of the afternoon, and walked slowly across the garden toward the palace. That concludes Chapter 15 of Mara, Daughter of the Nile.